HFY Vanguard. When the galaxy doubts us, we answer in fire and steel. The next chapter begins now.
The Eridan space station drifted like a weary titan across the void, its silhouette sharp against the scattered constellations. Once it had been the crown jewel of interstellar commerce, a beacon of human engineering and economic ambition. Now decades of wear and neglect had dulled its shine. In the outer district's areas locals bitterly called the dregs corridors, smelled faintly of rust, overheated circuitry, and recycled air too often pushed past its filtration limits. Walls were patched with metal plates of mismatched colors, and flickering lights gave the impression that night never ended, only paused for brief intervals of brightness. Inside one such apartment, if the crumbling square of metal could be called that, Astra stood before a cracked mirror. Its surface distorted her features, but it was the best she had. Her soft bluish skin, usually a source of subtle pride, appeared almost sickly under the stuttering light overhead. She reached up to touch one of her antennae, noting the way it drooped toward the floor, a clearer tell of nerve she could not disguise. Her silver-white hair, her one vanity, had lost its luster. Once brushed and flowing, it now clung limply to her shoulders, as though weighed down by the hopelessness around her. "This is as good as it's going to get," she muttered, tugging at the frayed edge of her sweater. The garment had been patched so many times it resembled a quilt, squares of faded fabric stitched together with the precision of someone who could not afford to waste even a thread. Her skirt was no better short enough to leave her legs feeling exposed, yet unremarkable enough to make her invisible in the crowd. The contradiction gnawed at her simultaneously, ashamed to be seen and desperate not to be overlooked. Astra drew in a slow breath, pressing both palms against the battered sink beneath the mirror. Today was not just another day. Today was the possibility of everything changing. She had found the job posting by chance hidden in the scrolling feed of an outdated data terminal in the public square. Terran Interstellar Corporation Diplomatic Liaison. A position with benefits, security, and a wage that could raise her above the squalor of the dregs. It felt like a dream too grand to touch, yet the posting had not specified human applicants only. She had clung to that technicality like a lifeline. Her doubts whispered cruelly, "They'll laugh at you. You'll never belong in their gleaming towers. You'll walk in and they'll see your patched clothes, your poor posture, your alien features, and they'll send you away." "Stop it," Astra whispered sharply, her voice steadier than she felt. "They're hiring for your mind, not your wardrobe. They're hiring for your brain." At least that was what she hoped. She had spent years forcing knowledge into herself the way one forces seeds into cracked earth, praying something would grow. Public terminals, borrowed data pads, anything she could get her hands on had become her tutors. While others in the dregs wasted themselves in the cycle of poverty and despair, Astra taught herself the fundamentals of galactic history, trade, negotiations, and cultural anthropology. She was fluent in 8 languages now, each one learned painfully syllable by syllable. She could explain the courtship rituals of 17 species, the power structures of planetary councils. She had never set foot on the delicate etiquette required when greeting an insectoid monarch. Yet none of it showed on her surface. To the world, she was still a thin girl in ragged clothes, another shadow haunting the neglected edges of Eridan Station. Memories rose unbidden, her parents researchers stationed here once upon a time, brilliant minds whose accident had left her orphaned and directionless. She remembered standing at their graveside alone, promises whispered through clenched teeth. "I will not waste the lives you gave me. I will not let this place destroy me." That vow carried her to this moment. Pulling her battered datapad close, Astra left her tiny room. The journey to the corporate sector took nearly 40 minutes by tram. At first, the vehicle rattled past the dregs, overcrowded corridors, children playing with broken machines, vendors selling nutrient paste disguised as stew. Then the scenery changed. Each district closer to the core grew cleaner, brighter. Lights stayed steady instead of flickering. Holographic advertisements shimmered across polished walls. People's clothes shifted from patched to tailored, from necessity to luxury. With every stop, Astra felt herself shrinking more alien than ever. By the time she stepped onto the pristine platform of the central hub, her heart was pounding. The floor gleamed so brightly she almost expected to see her reflection. Synthetic sunlight bathed the cavernous chamber in golden warmth, making it easy to forget the cold void outside. And there it was, Terran Interstellar Corporation headquarters. A towering monolith of steel and glass, its sharp angles softened by architectural grace. The building stretched upward like a challenge to the stars themselves. Corporate banners rippled in the station's controlled breeze, displaying the silver insignia of TI, a stylized starburst over a pair of clasped hands. Power radiated from the very structure, an unspoken reminder of humanity's dominance in the corporate world. Astra stood frozen at the base of the building, staring upward until her neck ached. She had walked past this district only a handful of times in her life, each time watching from a distance, never daring to approach. Now she was at its doorstep, clutching a data pad loaded with her application. Her antennae twitched, uncertain. They'll see me for what I am, she thought. They'll see I don't belong. But another voice, stubborn, determined, rose inside her. They will see what I can do. They will see what I've made of myself. The doors hissed open. Inside stretched a lobby so vast it seemed to swallow her whole. Light refracted across brushed steel and glass. Every surface gleamed with wealth, efficiency, and order. The air smelled faintly of polished stone and expensive perfume, an intoxicating contrast to the recycled musk of the dregs. Astra felt small every step, echoing too loudly as she crossed the floor. And there behind the curved reception desk sat a woman of Astra's own species, silver-white hair, cascading in perfect waves, a fashionable outfit hugging every curve with confidence. Her violet eyes flicked up as Astra approached, lips curling in amusement. The contrast between them could not have been sharper, one flawless, radiant, the other patched together, trembling but determined. Astra tightened her grip on the datapad, forcing herself to stand tall despite the weight of her clothes, her history, her fear. She had made it this far. She had not turned back. Whatever came next, she would face it head on. The receptionist's smile widened, and the first words slipped out, honeyed and venomous at once. "Good morning. How can I help you?" Astra's pulse hammered. This was the precipice, the edge between the life she had always known and the one she dreamed of. She squared her shoulders, lifted her chin, and prepared to speak. "Good morning. I'm here about the position for diplomatic liaison." Astra said, her voice steady, though her hands tightened around the datapad. The receptionist tilted her head, scanning Astra slowly from head to toe. Her violet eyes gleamed with the cruel delight of someone who had just been handed a toy to break. "Are you now?" Her tone dripped amusement. She leaned back in her chair, her flawless hair cascading down her shoulders like a silver waterfall. Astra felt heat rising to her cheeks. She had expected judgment, perhaps even dismissal, but the naked mockery in the woman's voice hit like a slap. "Yes," Astra managed. "I have an appointment. Astravalin." She pronounced each syllable carefully, forcing authority into her voice. The receptionist's lips twitched. She tapped at her terminal with long, glittering nails, exaggerating the gesture so that everyone nearby could see. A faint chuckle escaped her throat. "Oh, I see," she said loudly enough to draw the attention of several passing employees. "Yes, you are punctual, very punctual." A few heads turned. A couple of humans in pristine uniforms glanced Astra's way, then quickly exchanged smirks. One stifled a laugh behind his hand. The humiliation pressed down like a weight, each passing second stretching unbearably. Astra swallowed, trying to ignore the heat in her chest, the instinct to turn and flee back to the safety of the tram. But she had promised herself she would not run. Not today. "Is there a problem?" she asked, though the question came out softer than she had intended. The receptionist leaned forward, feigning innocence. "Not at all, though I must say our dress code is rather specific. Perhaps you misunderstood the nature of the position. We're not a charity center." The jab landed hard, and nearby laughter rippled louder. Astra's antennae drooped. She clutched her datapad tighter, willing herself not to break. "This was a mistake. You don't belong here." The voice in her head was sharp, merciless. She could almost feel herself turning toward the door. Just one step, and she could be gone, back to obscurity, back to safety. Then another voice cut across the room, deep, commanding, impossible to ignore. "Is there an issue here, Miss Rex?" The laughter died instantly. Silence fell over the lobby like a shroud. Every head turned. The receptionist's smirk froze on her lips. Her posture straightened in an instant, her tone flipping to professional deference. "Mr. Stone," she stammered. "No, sir. I was just clarifying corporate policy for this applicant." Astra turned slowly, her breath caught. The man before her seemed larger than life. He stood tall, broad-shouldered in a dark gray suit that fit like it had been crafted around his body. His hair, dark blonde, slightly tousled, framed a face that was all hard lines and intensity. Steel gray eyes swept the room with an authority that brooked no argument. Power radiated from him, not the flashy kind of wealth or arrogance, but the solid, undeniable presence of a leader who commanded. Evan Stone, the CEO of Terran Interstellar Corporation. She had seen his face on holo broadcasts in the scrolling news feeds that sometimes flickered even in the dregs. She had never imagined she would be standing in front of him. "You're Astra Valin," he asked, his voice firm, but not unkind. Astra nodded, unable to trust her own voice. Stone's gaze swept over her, pausing briefly on the patched sweater, the faded skirt, the nervous posture. Unlike the receptionist, there was no mockery in his eyes, only assessment, calculation. And then he turned back to the desk. "Miss Rex," he said evenly, "hire her right now." The receptionist's mouth fell open. "Sir, you heard me. Process her paperwork immediately. She starts today." But Stone's tone sharpened, though he didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Are you questioning me, Miss Rex?" The receptionist paled. "No, sir, of course not." Goodstone replied, his gaze flicking back to Astra. "Unless you object, Miss Valin." Astra blinked. For a heartbeat, she thought she had misheard. "No objection, sir." Stone nodded once decisively, as if that was the only answer he had expected. "Then it's settled. Report to HR immediately. You'll be briefed in my office at 1300 hours. And with that, he turned and strode away, his presence cutting through the lobby like a blade through air. Employees parted instinctively to make way. His departure left a stunned silence in his wake. Astra remained frozen for several long seconds, struggling to process what had just happened. One moment she had been the butt of public ridicule on the verge of retreat. The next she had been personally hired by the most powerful man on the station. The receptionist Lexa Reax, her terminal display identified, was not nearly so stunned. Her expression hardened into one of undisguised resentment, violet eyes flashing with something between humiliation and fury. "Well," she said tightly, her voice devoid of the earlier mockery. "Congratulations, it seems. Follow me to human resources." Her tone carried no warmth, only the bitterness of someone forced to comply against her will. Astra's legs moved before her mind caught up. She followed Reax through the gleaming corridors of the headquarters. Every step echoed in her chest like a drumbeat of disbelief. She had not only survived the humiliation, she had triumphed, lifted by Stone's recognition in front of everyone. But the question gnawed at her as she walked. Why had Evan Stone chosen her? Why had he overridden every procedure, every expectation to place his trust in a girl from the dregs dressed in rag? The HR department welcomed her with sterile efficiency. Scanners hummed forms, flashed across hollow screens. Orientation modules flickered by in rapid succession. Within an hour, she had an employee badge, a company-issued datapad, and access codes stamped with the Terran Interstellar insignia. As she slipped into the sleek charcoal uniform of TIC, the transformation was startling. The fabric fit her as though tailored smooth against her skin, carrying the weight of authority she had never known. Looking into the mirror on the wall, she hardly recognized the woman staring back. Her shoulders straightened, her chin lifted. For the first time, she looked like she belonged. But beneath the uniform, the doubts remained. Stone had seen something in her, something no one else had. But what if she failed? What if the faith he had placed in her crumbled under the weight of expectation? The receptionist returned to escort her further, her expression still taut with restrained anger. "Mr. Stone insists all employees maintain a professional appearance," she said coolly, her tone suggesting Astra might not comprehend such a concept. Astra ignored the barb. She was too busy feeling the thrum of possibility in her veins. Hours ago, she had been one more forgotten life in the dregs. Now she was walking the halls of one of the most powerful corporations in the galaxy, hired personally by its CEO. Her journey had only just begun. And yet as she glanced sideways at Ryax's stiff shoulders, Astra understood one thing clearly: some enemies would not forgive humiliation, especially not in public. Whatever awaited her next, the path would not be easy, but she would walk it anyway. The sleek charcoal uniform fit Astra as though it had been designed with her in mind. The fabric clung in subtle professional lines, a far cry from the patchwork rags she had worn into the building that morning. On her chest gleamed the silver insignia of Terran Interstellar Corporation, a stylized starburst that seemed to pulse faintly under the artificial light. For years, she had imagined what it would feel like to stand taller, to look like someone who belonged. She had always pictured that moment as distant, hypothetical, maybe even impossible. But now, as she caught sight of herself in the reflective wall panels of the 87th floor, she straightened instinctively. The woman in the reflection was not a child from the dregs. She was someone new, someone stepping into the unknown. Stone's assistant greeted her outside the office. The woman was human, sharp-eyed, efficient, her hair tied in a severe bun that spoke of discipline. "He's ready for you," she said simply. No judgment in her tone, only precision. Astra inhaled deeply, forcing her lungs to slow. Her palms were damp despite her best efforts to remain calm. She clutched her datapad as though it were a shield and stepped forward. The door slid open with a whisper. Stone's office surprised her. She had expected opulence, gilded walls, floating holograms of stock market victories, ostentatious displays of wealth. Instead, the space was austere, minimal. A wide desk of polished stone dominated the center, its surface free of clutter. One wall was entirely transparent, offering a breathtaking view of Eridan Station's outer curve and the massive gas giant it orbited. Beyond the stars stretched infinite and merciless. Evan Stone stood with his back to her, hands clasped behind him, gazing out the window. The lines of his suit accentuated a frame of quiet power. "Miss Valen," he said, without turning his voice even almost clinical. "Punctual." "Yes, sir," Astra replied, proud that her voice did not tremble. He turned then, and those steel-gray eyes locked on her once more. It was like being weighed, measured, assessed in a single glance. "Good," he said, the single syllable, sharp as the edge of a blade. Astra forced herself to stand straight. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Stone, though I admit I'm curious why you hired me without an interview." Stone's lips quirked the faintest ghost of a smile. "I don't waste time on unnecessary procedures. I saw what I needed to see." "And what was that exactly?" He stepped around the desk, leaning against its edge with casual authority. "Someone who doesn't belong in the dregs. Someone with potential." The words hit Astra harder than any insult could. She had lived her entire life, dismissed, overlooked, mocked. To hear those words spoken, not as pity, but as recognition, it unsettled her, stripped away the armor she had carried for years. Her antenna twitched with surprise. "You recognize I was from the dregs?" she asked. "I make it my business to know this station and its people," Stone replied simply. He gestured to a chair opposite his desk. "Sit." Astra obeyed, lowering herself carefully into the seat. She kept her posture straight, determined not to appear meek. "Your file says you're self-educated." Stone continued, activating a holographic display with a tap on his desk. The air shimmered with data. Astra's name, her languages, her cultural expertise, fragments compiled from her application. 8 languages, 17 cultural systems. Impressive. Astra blinked. "My file, but I hadn't even submitted my full application when you hired me." Stone's eyes glinted. "No, but your preliminary submission contained enough for our AI to compile a basic profile." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze piercing. "What it didn't explain is why someone with your capabilities was living in the dregs, wearing clothes that belonged in a recycler." The directness of the question struck her like a punch. For a moment, Astra's throat constricted. Then slowly she spoke. "I had limited options. My parents were researchers. They died in a lab accident when I was young. With no family connections and being not human, in a predominantly human sector, opportunities were scarce." She trailed off, unwilling to sound like she was making excuses. Stone nodded once as if confirming a suspicion. And yet you educated yourself, found ways to access information most in your position wouldn't bother with. Knowledge, Astra said softly, is the one thing they can't take from you. Something flickered in Stone's eyes, approval perhaps, or recognition. He tapped the desk again, and the holographic display shifted to a galactic map. Regions of controlled space glowed in various colors, while highlighted trade routes branched outward like veins of light. TIEC is expanding its diplomatic division, he explained. We need people who understand the nuances of interspecies relations, not just the theory, the reality. The display zoomed in on a sector near the Proxima Centauri routes. We're negotiating access here. The Centaurians are notoriously difficult, prideful, traditional, suspicious of outsiders, especially humans. While Astra leaned forward, studying the highlighted regions. They value authenticity above all else. They can sense deception easily, which is why human negotiators struggle. Their neural pathways process emotional cues differently. Stone's eyebrow arched slightly. You've studied the Centaurians specifically. Among others, Astra replied, her voice gaining strength as the conversation shifted into familiar ground. Their cultural evolution is fascinating, a balance between collective consciousness and fierce individualism. They don't separate personal honor from political negotiation. Stone nodded, a small flicker of genuine interest crossing his stern features. Then you understand why I need someone like you. The hologram shifted again, displaying a sleek diplomatic vessel. The Centurion delegation arrives in 3 days. You'll be part of our welcome team. You'll work directly with me to ensure the negotiations proceed smoothly. Astra's heart lurched. This wasn't an entry-level desk position. This was immediate immersion into high-stakes diplomacy with the CEO himself. Sir, she began cautiously, I'm honored, but... You're concerned about your lack of practical experience, Stone interrupted smoothly. Don't be. Theory without application is useless, yes, but so is experience without insight. You have the latter in abundance. He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. My assistant will provide you with the necessary materials. You have 3 days to prepare. I suggest you use them wisely. Astra rose as well, her mind spinning. Thank you, Mr. Stone. I won't let you down. See that you don't. His tone was firm, but not unkind. Then his gaze softened just slightly. One more thing, Miss Valen. Yeah. The company provides housing for key personnel. My assistant will arrange for your relocation from the dregs. I need you focused on the task at hand, not worried about transit or security. For a heartbeat, Astra was speechless. Corporate housing was a privilege reserved for proven executives, not brand new hires. That's extremely generous, sir. It's practical, not generous, Stone corrected. Your skills are an asset to this company, and I protect my assets. The words sank deep, stirring something unexpected in Astra's chest. Not pity, not charity, a recognition of value. As she left the office, her head swam with the weight of it all. She had entered the building as a figure of ridicule, mocked and belittled. Now she was walking out with a new identity, a new home, and the trust of the most powerful man on the station. But beneath the exhilaration, questions whispered. Why her? Why had Stone chosen her so decisively, so publicly? As the elevator descended, Astra caught her reflection in the polished metal walls. The woman staring back no longer looked like a discarded shadow from the dregs. She looked purposeful, determined. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe that she had a future worth fighting for. The corporate housing was everything Astra had never dared to imagine: clean lines, polished floors, a private sleeping chamber, even a window that stretched from floor to ceiling with a view of the gas giant. When she set down the single crate containing her meager possessions, the space swallowed it whole, the contrast almost laughable. She sat on the edge of the sleek bed for a long moment, stunned by the shift. In one day, she had been ridiculed in the lobby, hired by the CEO, and moved into a residence that dwarfed her entire childhood apartment. The transformation was dizzying, but there was no time to bask in it. Stone had given her 3 days. 3 days to prepare for the most important diplomatic negotiations of her life. The following morning, Astra reported to her new office, an expansive suite on one of the upper floors outfitted with holographic projectors and communication consoles. She had barely stepped inside when the door slid open behind her. Standing there, her expression sour enough to curdle milk, was Lexa Ryax, the same receptionist who had mocked her in front of everyone. "You must be joking," Lexa said flatly, violet eyes narrowing. Astra blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" Lexa crossed her arms, her flawless hair shimmering under the overhead light. "I've been informed that I'm to serve as your administrative liaison for the Centurion negotiations." Her voice dripped disbelief, as though the words themselves tasted foul. "I am the chief reception coordinator for this entire corporation. I do not serve as anyone's assistant." Astra hesitated, the tension in the air thick enough to choke on. If this was Mr. Stone's directive, then... It was another voice cut in. Stone's assistant, Diana Mercer, stepped into the room, her posture crisp, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Stone feels your skills would be better utilized in this capacity, Miss Reacts. The directive comes directly from him." The implication was clear. Stone had seen Lex's behavior in the lobby, and this was the consequence. Shock, anger, and humiliation flashed across Lex's features before she masked them under a veneer of professionalism. "I see," she said tightly. "Well then, how may I assist you, Miss Valen?" Diana nodded, satisfied. "Good, I'll leave you both to get acquainted. Miss Valen, your housing details are in your profile. Your belongings will be transferred this evening." With that, she left the door hissing shut behind her. Silence stretched between the two women. Lexa's gaze was sharp, defensive, but beneath it burned something more dangerous, wounded pride. "Let's be clear," Lexa said finally, her voice low-controlled. "This is temporary. Once the Centurion negotiations are over, I'll return to my proper position and you'll be forgotten faster than last season's fashion trends." Astra studied her for a moment, weighing her response. She could lash back, revel in the reversal of power. She could mock Lexa the way she had been mocked. But what would that achieve? Instead, she chose a different path. "I understand you are upset," she said calmly, "but right now we both have jobs to do. The Centurion delegation arrives in 3 days and I need to be fully prepared. So can we set aside personal feelings and work together professionally?" Lexa blinked clearly, not expecting that response. For a long moment, her expression remained rigid. Then she exhaled sharply. "Fine. What do you need first?" "Your name," Astra said simply. "Your actual name, not just Miss Reacts." Lexa hesitated. Then grudgingly, "Lexa." "Lexa Ryax." Astra nodded. "Thank you, Lexa. I'm Astra." She gestured toward the seating area. "Now let's talk about what we know of the Centurion delegation." The next few hours passed in a blur of work. Lexa, for all her initial hostility, proved to be exceptionally competent. She accessed databases Astra could never have reached on her own. She pulled up detailed dossiers on the Centurion delegation, cross-referenced past negotiation attempts, and provided insights into the labyrinth of internal politics within TC. They drafted a preliminary welcome protocol, adjusting environmental settings to match Centurion preferences. They preferred dim lighting and higher humidity than humans, Lexa noted, scrolling through specifications. "I'll make sure the meeting rooms are adjusted accordingly." "Good catch," Astra said, genuinely impressed. "Also ensure all refreshments are plant-based. They consider consuming animal protein in business settings to be vulgar." Lexa arched an eyebrow, a flicker of reluctant respect in her expression. "You really have studied them." "It's been my life's work," Astra replied. For a time their collaboration flowed surprisingly smoothly, the sharp edges between them dulled by necessity. But then Lexa hesitated, her fingers pausing on the data pad. "There's something else you should know," she said slowly. Astra looked up. "What's that?" Lexa's voice dropped, cautious. "These negotiations. They're more important than Stone is letting on. TICE isn't just expanding, it's fighting to survive." Astra frowned. TIC is one of the most successful corporations in the sector. "On paper," Lexa said bitterly. "But behind the curtain, failed ventures, rising competition, the board growing restless. If the Proxima Centauri routes aren't secured, Stone could lose everything." The revelation sent a chill through Astra. "Why are you telling me this?" Lexa's lips twisted into a thin, ironic smile. "Because despite what you might think of me, I care about this company. And Stone, for all his faults, he's a better leader than anyone the board would replace him with. If he falls, we all do." Astra studied her, carefully searching for deception. But there was none. Lexa's pride was still sharp, her resentment simmering, but her words rang true. "Thank you," Astra said finally. "I'll keep it in mind." Lexa looked away, uncomfortable with the sincerity. "Don't thank me yet. Just do your job. We can't afford for you to fail." That evening, Astra lingered in her new office after Lexa had left. The artificial sunset bled across the station, painting the commercial district in shades of crimson and gold. She stood at the window, her reflection superimposed over the stars beyond. Stone had placed his faith in her. He had trusted her with responsibilities that could shape the future of the corporation and perhaps the sector itself. But now she knew the stakes were even higher than she had realized. If she failed, it would not just be her reputation shattered. It would be Stone's career, Tick's future, maybe even the stability of interstellar trade. Her pulse quickened. The enormity of it threatened to crush her. But beneath the fear, a spark of determination ignited. She had spent her entire life fighting to be seen, to be valued, to rise above the weight of circumstance. This was her chance not just to prove herself, but to change everything. As the stars glittered coldly beyond the glass, Astra whispered to her reflection, "You can do this." And for the first time, she almost believed it. The executive dining room was perched high in TI-6 Tower, its transparent walls giving a panoramic view of the gas giant below. The light reflected off the swirling clouds of amber and violet, casting the room in hues that seemed more like art than nature. Astra arrived promptly at 0700, the new uniform fitting her like second skin. Stone was already seated at a table by the window reviewing a data pad. His presence was as steady and commanding as ever, but when his eyes lifted to meet hers, his expression softened just slightly, enough to send an unfamiliar warmth curling through Astra's chest. "Miss Violin," he said, standing just enough to acknowledge her. "Right on time." "Good morning, Mr. Stone," she replied, her voice more confident than the day before. A server appeared immediately, placing a cup of steaming tea before her. Astra blinked in surprise. It was Arcturan black tea, her preferred morning drink, something she had never mentioned to anyone at Tix. "Your file indicated a preference," Stone said, noting her expression. "I took the liberty." "Thank you," Astra said, softly touched. It wasn't just the drink, it was the gesture, the acknowledgement of something personal in a world that often treated her as an outsider. They began breakfast with quiet efficiency, fresh fruit and pastries arranged artfully between them. But Stone wasted little time on small talk. He dove directly into strategy. "Our lead negotiator, Ambassador Threll, is notoriously difficult," he said, projecting a profile onto the table's hollow display. A tall, iridescent-skinned centurion appeared, his elongated features framed by ceremonial markings. "He's rejected 3 human proposals in the last year alone." Astra leaned forward, studying the data. "He's from the southern continent. That region places higher value on historical ties than most centurions. If we acknowledge TIC's past missteps before presenting new terms, it could build trust." Stone raised an eyebrow. "Admitting fault isn't standard corporate protocol." "With humans, perhaps," Astra replied. "But centurions see acknowledgement of past mistakes as wisdom, not weakness. It shows growth." Stone considered this, then nodded slowly. "An interesting approach. I'll consider it." As the discussion continued, Astra found herself increasingly aware of the man across from her, the way his hands moved with precise emphasis, the steel in his gaze when speaking of rivals, the rare flashes of dry humor. It all fascinated her. For years she had admired him from afar as a symbol of power. Now sitting here, she saw the man behind the legend. And something dangerous stirred inside her. Admiration, certainly, gratitude undeniably. But beneath it, something warmer, more urgent, something that made her heart beat faster. She pushed it aside, focusing on the files. This was business. But Stone seemed to sense it too. His gaze lingered on her longer than necessary, his voice lowering just slightly when he said, "Sometimes, Miss Valen, the right partner makes all the difference." Before she could respond, his datapad chimed urgently. He scanned the message, his jaw tightening. "The Centurion delegation has arrived early," he said sharply. Astra's eyes widened. "Early by how much?" 3 hours. They're docking now." Her stomach lurched. They weren't ready. The environmental adjustments, the welcome protocols, the ceremonial arrangements. None of it was finished. "This was no accident," Stone muttered, rising to his feet. "Someone fed them false information. They expect a full welcome ceremony upon arrival." "Sabotage," Astra said grimly. Stone nodded once. Meet me in the main conference room in 15 minutes. Bring reacts. We'll need all hands. The next 3 hours were chaos. Astra, Stone, and Lexa moved like pieces on a desperate board, coordinating with departments across the station. Environmental controls adjusted to Centurion humidity and lighting preferences. Lexa reported her fingers flying across her datapad. The kitchens are preparing vegetable-based dishes, Stone added, issuing orders to the head chef. Focus on root vegetables. Centurions associate them with stability and trust. Astra oversaw the diplomatic staff, briefing them on etiquette and ensuring no one committed a cultural blunder. She forced her own nerves aside, channeling every ounce of knowledge she had hoarded over the years. By the time the docking alarm sounded, the lobby had been transformed. Harsh lights replaced with soft amber glow, humidity generators humming discreetly, subtle fragrances reminiscent of the Centurion homeworld drifting in the air. Astra adjusted the cuffs of her deep blue formal suit, chosen to complement her skin tone. Stone stood beside her, his own attire immaculate. When his gaze swept over her, he said only, "You look appropriate." But his eyes betrayed something warmer. The delegation entered. Ambassador Threll led the way, his iridescent skin shimmering in hues of cautious blue. His multifaceted eyes scanned the lobby, taking in every detail. Stone stepped forward, performing the traditional Centurion greeting, a shallow bow with palms outward. "Ambassador Threll," he said respectfully, "on behalf of Terran Interstellar Corporation, I welcome you to Aridin Station." Threll studied him, then glanced at Astra. "And you are not human." "No, Ambassador," Astra said, stepping forward with precise accuracy in the greeting. "I am Aerodani, native to this station. My role is to ensure mutual understanding and beneficial cooperation between our peoples." Threll's skin shifted, faintly hints of green curiosity weaving among the blue. "Well spoken. We shall see if your actions match your words." The ceremony proceeded without disaster, though Astra's nerves burned under the scrutiny. When the delegation was finally escorted to their quarters, Stone leaned close and murmured, "Well done. He's cautious, not hostile, and he's testing us." Astra nodded. "The early arrival wasn't an accident. They wanted to see how we responded under pressure." Stone's jaw tightened. "Then let's show them." Preliminary negotiations began that afternoon. Around the table sat TS executives, Centurion delegates, and most noticeably Director Voss. Something about his demeanor gnawed at Astra. Each time he spoke, Threll's skin darkened toward suspicion. During a brief recess, Astra whispered to Stone, "He doesn't trust Voss." His colors deepen every time Voss opens his mouth. Stone's gaze sharpened. "Lexa found evidence Voss met with Nova Corporation representatives before today. He may be working against us." "What do we do?" Astra asked. "We change tactics," Stone said firmly. "When we reconvene, I want you to take the lead." Astra's pulse spiked. "Me?" Stone's eyes locked on hers. "I trust you. Now show me I'm right." When the session resumed, Stone shocked the room. "With your permission, Ambassador, I'd like Specialist Valen to present our revised proposal." All eyes turned to Astra. She rose slowly, every step toward the center, feeling heavier than the last. She drew in a steadying breath. "Ambassador, honored delegates," she began. "I would like to begin by acknowledging past missteps in human-Centurion relations." A ripple of surprise moved through the room. Voss looked alarmed. Terran Interstellar Corporation has in the past focused too heavily on profit-neglecting long-term partnership. This was short-sighted and disrespectful of Centurion values. Threll's skin brightened a positive shift. "Today we propose something different." Astra continued, activating a holographic display, a joint venture. Tick ships would carry both human and Centurion goods. Profits shared equitably. Risk shared. Growth shared. Threll's iridescence shifted toward a pleased golden hue. "This is unauthorized," Voss burst out, his voice sharp. "The board has not approved these terms." "I am CEO of this corporation," Stone said coolly. "I have full authority to negotiate in TIX's best interests." "These terms are too generous," Voss insisted. Ambassador Astra interjected smoothly. "Is it not true in Centurion culture that the most valuable partnerships are those where both sides prosper equally, rather than one exploiting the other?" Threll inclined his head. "Indeed, a fundamental principle." His gaze turned to Voss. "Curious that a director of your corporation objects to mutual benefit." Voss sputtered. "I merely question the wisdom." Or perhaps Threll interrupted, his voice like iron. You object because these terms differ from what you discussed with Nova Corporation yesterday. The room froze. Gasps rippled through the delegation. Voss's face drained of color. That's a serious accusation, Stone said carefully. It is fact, Threll replied. Director Voss advised us in Nova that TX was collapsing. He suggested we wait for more favorable terms after your downfall. Stone's expression turned thunderous. Security, he barked. Escort Director Voss from this chamber. As guards hauled the pale, sweating man away, Stone turned back to the delegation. Ambassador, on behalf of TIC, I apologize for this treachery. Threll studied him, then turned to Astra. Your proposal intrigues me, Specialist Valen. Let us continue without interruption. By evening, a preliminary agreement was reached. Genuine partnership, equitable terms, and for the first time a Centurion hue of deep green approval. As the delegation departed, Threll paused beside Astra. You are unusual, an Aerodani speaking for humans, yet advocating for fairness. I respect this. Thank you, Ambassador, Astra said, bowing her head. My goal has always been understanding. When the chamber emptied, Stone turned to her. His expression, usually so guarded, was a mix of admiration and something more personal. That was remarkable, he said quietly. You achieved in one day what others failed to in months. We all contributed, Astra said modestly. Even Lex's discovery about Voss was vital. Stone's gaze lingered. Then deliberately he said, Join me for dinner tonight, my quarters, to discuss next steps. Astra's pulse quickened. She nodded slowly. I'd be delighted. That night, Stone's private residence surprised her. Unlike the austere office, his home was warm, filled with soft lighting and physical books. The man she met over dinner was not just the CEO. He was a man with a past, a story of working his way from nothing, of battles fought and won. As they shared food and stories, Astra felt the walls around her heart begin to crack. And when the evening darkened with an urgent call from security, Nova's digital sabotage striking TX servers, she stood beside Stone and Lexa, hacking and countering with every skill she possessed. Fingers flew over consoles, codes, battled codes. For tense minutes, it felt like a war fought in silence and light. Then Astra spotted the pattern, the flaw. It's Aerodani encryption, she realized. I can break it. Together, they pushed back, flipped the attack, and exposed communications between Nova and Orion allies. When the last virus was purged, Stone turned to her, his steel eyes softened by genuine awe. That was extraordinary. Breathless adrenaline coursing Astra met his gaze. The room fell silent except for their ragged breathing. And then slowly, inexorably, Stone closed the distance. Their first kiss was tentative, testing a clash of different worlds. Their second was undeniable, filled with all the fire of triumph and all the longing they had denied. When they finally broke apart, Astra whispered, I didn't expect this. Stone smiled faintly. Life is complicated, but some risks are worth it. 6 months later, Astra Valen stood at the window of her corner office, gazing down at the bustling arteries of Aerodani Station. The once gray district of commerce shimmered with activity, ships docking in rhythmic precision, holographic banners, advertising trade agreements, diplomatic envoys moving between embassies. The view was breathtaking, but what filled her chest was not the skyline itself, it was the knowledge of how far she had come. This office, spacious and gleaming with the latest holographic consoles, was hers. The plaque on the door bore her name and title, Director of Interspecies Relations, Terran Interstellar Corporation. Under her leadership, the division had flourished. The Centurion Agreement had become a model for equitable partnerships, generating not only unprecedented profits, but also goodwill that extended far beyond the Proxima routes. 3 additional civilizations had since joined TIC's trade network, drawn by Astra's diplomacy and her reputation for fairness. Where once her days had been filled with scavenged lessons at public terminals, now they were filled with negotiations that shaped entire star systems. She turned to her silver-white hair, catching the artificial light. On her desk rested a simple pendant, a gift from Evan Stone, crafted of human alloys, an Aerodani crystal. Its design blended 2 cultures into one seamless piece. She wore it close to her skin, a reminder not only of him, but of the journey they had undertaken together. The door opened softly. Stone stepped inside, closing it behind him. His presence still carried that same gravity, but there was something else now, too. Something gentler in the way his gaze lingered on her. "I was thinking about the first time I saw you," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "Standing in the lobby, clutching that old data pad dressed in rags. You looked terrified and determined." Astra smiled wryly. "Not my finest moment." On the contrary, Stone moved closer, taking her hands in his. "It was the moment I realized this corporation needed someone like you. Someone who could see past numbers and hierarchies, who understood struggle and perseverance. Someone who could bridge worlds." He opened a small box, revealing a chain that glinted with blue stones matching her skin. "It reminded me of you, a perfect blend of difference and harmony." Her throat tightened as he fastened it around her neck. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "So are you," he said simply. For a moment, silence stretched, filled only by the hum of the station. She leaned into him, comforted by the steadiness of his embrace. Their relationship had not been without challenges. Cultural differences between human and Eridani ways sometimes sparked misunderstandings. Once Astra had misinterpreted a human idiom in a diplomatic briefing, offering a literal explanation that left half the boardroom puzzled and the other half amused. Another time, Stone had unwittingly violated an Eridani courtesy by interrupting her antennae gesture mid-sentence, leaving her flustered until they both burst into laughter. But through patience, humor, and mutual respect, they had navigated those moments. In fact, they had grown stronger because of them. Stone pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers. "What are you thinking?" Astra touched the pendant resting against her chest. "I'm thinking about beginnings, how sometimes the most unlikely ones lead to the most extraordinary destinations." Stone's lips curved into a faint smile. Indeed. They stood together, gazing out at the stars. Beyond Eridan, challenges still loomed. Nova Corporation had not vanished. The Orion Consortium remained a shadowy adversary. The galaxy was a web of alliances and betrayals, and the future was far from certain. But Astra no longer feared uncertainty. She had faced humiliation, sabotage, and impossible stakes, and she had not only survived, she had triumphed. And now, with Stone at her side, she felt ready for whatever came next. Her mind flickered briefly to Lexa Reacts. The former receptionist had been reinstated to her prior post after the Centurion negotiations, though her time as Astra's liaison had changed her. Their relationship remained prickly, filled with barbed comments and thinly veiled jabs, but there was also respect there now, however grudging. Lexa had proven herself resourceful when Tiak needed her most, and Astra would not forget that. The memory of those frantic hours, Lexa adjusting environmental systems, Stone rallying staff, Astra leading the ceremony, still lived vividly in her. They had forged something together in that crucible of crisis, and though Lexa would never admit it, Astra suspected she no longer saw her as the girl in rags. Stone's voice drew her back. "The board meets tomorrow. They'll want a progress report on the Centurion routes and projections for the new partnerships." Astra nodded. "They'll get one, along with recommendations for expanding into the Orion sectors on our terms, not Nova's." His smile deepened, pride flickering in his eyes. "You've become formidable, Astra." "I had a good teacher," she said, her voice softening. For a heartbeat, their gazes held the air between them, charged not with tension, but with a quiet certainty. This was no longer a fragile bond born of circumstance. It was a partnership equal and enduring. Stone reached for her hand again, intertwining his fingers with hers. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." Astra's antennae lifted slightly, a gesture of Eridani affirmation. Together. Outside the window, the gas giant swirled endlessly, its storms vast and unyielding. Ships streaked past in lines of light, carrying goods, hopes, and dreams across the stars. Astra Violin, once a girl mocked for her clothes in a corporate lobby, now stood as a director shaping interstellar policy a woman loved and respected, a bridge between worlds. She smiled faintly, feeling the weight of the pendant against her skin. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in her life, she welcomed that uncertainty, because she was no longer walking it alone.